Stephanie White, wake up, snap out of it. Snap out of it. The expansion draft, you need to protect your players. You have just a few days left to do that. There's a lot of big business going on. We got teams getting sold, all types of stuff. You need to figure out how you're going to build the roster around Caitlin Clark. What are you going to do with Kelsey Mitchell? But no, I cannot believe Stephanie White is still running around, wasting time on a bunch of nonsense, and then had the nerve.
Stephanie White just went on ESPN and did something that has Fever fans shaking their heads. With the expansion draft just days away, and Indiana's roster still full of question marks, she spent her time gushing over college teams loaded with offensive firepower. And that's where the frustration really kicks in. This is the same coach who spent last season calling Caitlin Clark's explosive scoring hero ball, suggesting it needed to be toned down. But now, she's openly praising teams for the very same kind of offensive weapons and firepower Clark brings to the floor every single night. The contradiction isn't subtle, it's glaring. Fever fans aren't just confused anymore, they're fed up. At a moment when the franchise should be laser-focused on building a championship-caliber roster around one of the most dynamic offensive players the WNBA has ever seen, the conversation seems to be drifting elsewhere. So the question becomes unavoidable. When did breaking down UConn versus South Carolina take priority over building a real contender in Indiana?
Okay, Caitlin Clark, the return of the GOAT in year 3, coming back to win the MVP and the WNBA title. Yes, that is what she is coming back to do. Now, we had a bunch of hiccups and mental blunders last offseason. Stephanie White, Kelly Krauskopf, Amber Cox. You guys went and got DeWanna the Scammer Bonner, who ran off with the money. And let's be real, Stephanie White, you never even fully addressed that problem. You tried to sweep the DeWanna Bonner situation under the rug and say nothing about it.
Caitlin Clark is heading into year 3 with one goal in mind: to take over the league, win MVP, and bring a WNBA title to Indiana. That's the expectation. And honestly, it's not unrealistic given the level she's already playing at. But the road here hasn't been smooth. Last off-season was filled with questionable decisions and costly missteps. From roster moves to front office judgment, there were too many moments that felt uncalculated. Stephanie White, Kelly Krauskopf, Amber Cox, you all played a part in shaping the situation. And then there's the Dana Bonner situation. Let's not pretend it didn't happen. The move didn't work out, the outcome raised serious concerns, and yet it was never fully addressed. Instead, it felt like the whole thing was quietly brushed aside, with no real accountability or explanation. For a franchise trying to build around a generational talent like Clark, that kind of silence only adds to the frustration.
We got to look at an article. And Stephanie White had something to say that really just was mind-boggling for me. It was a real head scratcher all the way around, and we've got to dive into it. This is courtesy of Sports Illustrated, Grant Young, okay? Now, it says, Stephanie White explains why South Carolina can't keep up with UConn. First of all, why the hell are you still talking about this college stuff? What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you still talking? You went and did your gigs. What are we talking about here? What are we talking about here? You need to be focused on the Indiana Fever right now. You're more concerned with if South Carolina can have a competitive game with you.
Let's talk about what Stephanie White should be doing right now, because the gap between that and what's actually happening is hard to ignore. The expansion draft is just days away. This is crunch time. The Fever need to lock in which players they're protecting, make a clear decision on Kelsey Mitchell's future, and actively work the phones to bring in free agents who actually complement Caitlin Clark's game. On top of that, they should be deep in draft prep, scouting prospects, building a strategy, and shaping a roster that can realistically compete. This is not a quiet period. It's one of the most important stretches of the entire off-season. And yet, instead of seeing that urgency reflected, the spotlight shifts elsewhere. Stephanie White is on ESPN, breaking down college basketball, debating whether South Carolina has enough offensive firepower to keep up with UConn. And that's where the disconnect really hits. Because fans are left asking a simple question: how is the head coach of the Indiana Fever focused on a college matchup while her own team's off-season feels unsettled? It doesn't add up, And that's exactly why the frustration keeps growing.
Now, nothing, absolutely nothing, is more important than getting the proper pieces around Caitlin Clark so that we can have a successful season. I don't even know why you're talking about them right now.
The most frustrating part isn't that she's talking about college basketball. It's what she said while doing it. On ESPN, Stephanie White broke it down plainly. She doesn't believe South Carolina can beat UConn because they lack offensive firepower. She praised UConn for being efficient, deep, and loaded with scoring options. She emphasized that in big games, it's offensive firepower that makes the difference. And that's where the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. Because just last season, that same offensive firepower, coming from Caitlin Clark, was being downplayed. When Clark was lighting up the New York Liberty, pulling up from logo range and putting on a scoring clinic that had the entire arena buzzing, the reaction from the sideline didn't match the moment. Instead of embracing it, it was labeled hero ball, as if it was something holding the team back rather than elevating it. Now, suddenly, offensive dominance is the gold standard again. That shift in messaging is exactly why fans are questioning the direction and the consistency of the leadership. So let me get this straight. When Caitlin Clark showcases the most explosive offensive firepower the WNBA has seen in years, it's labeled hero ball and treated like a problem. But when UConn does it in college basketball, suddenly it's the blueprint for winning championships. The mental gymnastics required to hold both of those positions at once is honestly impressive, in the most frustrating way possible. This is the same coach who spent last season trying to turn Aaliyah Boston into the hub of the offense, forcing a system that took the ball out of Clark's hands. Never mind that Indiana's offense was already thriving. Never mind that Clark's scoring gravity is the very reason this team is relevant again. The focus seemed to be on fitting players into a system, even if it meant limiting the most dangerous offensive weapon in the game. And now, that same offensive firepower is being praised on national television like it's the gold standard. Meanwhile, reality is knocking. The expansion draft is right around the corner, and the Fever are going to lose someone. That means tough decisions need to be made. Fast. Clark is obviously untouchable. Aaliyah Boston is a key piece as well. But beyond that, there are real questions. What happens with Kelsey Mitchell? Is she part of the long-term vision, and if so, at what cost? Does her playstyle truly complement Clark, or is that money better spent elsewhere? And Boston, she's talented no doubt, but last season's experiment didn't work. She's not a point center, and asking her to be the primary decision-maker only limited what she does best. She should be dominating inside, rebounding, protecting the rim, not being forced into a role that doesn't maximize her strengths. Then there's everything else. Defense, depth, identity. This team struggled defensively, which is ironic given White's reputation. Where are the perimeter defenders? Where are the veterans who bring toughness and accountability? Where are the role players who understand exactly how to fit next to a star like Clark? Instead of answers, there's noise. College basketball analysis. Debates about offensive efficiency in matchups that have nothing to do with fixing Indiana's problems. And it's not the first time. Balancing media work is one thing, but at some point, priorities have to be clear. This is the most critical window of the off-season. Free agency, trades, expansion decisions. This is where contenders are built. There's also a bigger issue here. Philosophy. White built her reputation on defense, yet now she's emphasizing offense when evaluating other teams. When Clark scores 30, it's too much. When UConn does it, it's beautiful basketball. That inconsistency isn't just noticeable, it's hard to ignore. And let's not rewrite last off-season. There were missteps. Moves that didn't pan out. Situations that raised questions about judgment, fit, and locker room dynamics. Those things matter. They shape culture. They define whether a team is building something real or just reacting as they go. The blueprint isn't complicated. Every successful team in this league has clarity. A star at the center, and a roster built to amplify that star. For Indiana, it's simple. Caitlin Clark is the engine. Surround her with shooters, defenders, and players who embrace their roles. Let Boston thrive in the paint. Add veterans who stabilize the locker room. Build identity, not confusion. The foundation is there. The talent is there. But none of it matters without focus and direction. Right now, it feels like the Fever are trying to do too many things at once, and that starts at the top. You can't split attention between being a media analyst and building a championship roster during the most important stretch of the offseason. Because time is ticking. The expansion draft is coming. Decisions have to be made. And if this team is serious about contending, the priorities need to shift, immediately. Caitlin Clark is doing her part. The question is whether the organization will do theirs.